Welcome to Coffee Talk, brought to you by Hyatt Commercial.
I'm your host, Justin Mullen, where industry executives talk leadership, culture, and commercial real estate. Grab your coffee and let's talk business.
All right, I'm here with David Lillefloren, also known as Lily, a good friend and mentor of mine over the years. Dave was with us back actually, I think on kind of our first version of the podcast here about 18 months ago. At the time, David recently transitioned to a role as a CEO and really an entrepreneurial role running SunRaycer. Dave, it's been now a little over 2 years that you've been in this new role. I kind of consider it for you as almost a third career. Tell us something that you've learned in the last 2 years that you didn't expect going into it now that you're in this entrepreneurial role that you're in.
Coming from a big organization like Constellation Energy after 18 years, and taking over with 3 employees, you going from that environment to all hands on deck has been, and over the last 18 months, growing the team to currently 25 employees. I think that's been finding the right people and the right seat on the bus for us has been what's been, I think, a lot of work to get to that point. I think the good news is we have a team at SunRaycer that has 136 years of experience on the leadership team and over 100 projects they've completed. So I think it was unexpected, but after 18 months, we have the right team and very excited about that.
No, I can relate. That's a extremely impressive growth in the last 2.5 years. And, before we hit record on the podcast here, we were just talking about some different ideas, and really one of the things that both of us came back to was really having the A players in the right seats in the industry, and knowing that when you hand something off, it's going to get done properly. And, I think we'll come back to some of the kind of leadership lessons that you've learned and some of your philosophies from a leadership perspective. But for those listening that don't know your background, give us your general biography and why I say it's kind of your third career.
Yes, I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1992. Did 8 years of active duty, followed by 12 years in the reserves. I retired in 2011 as a commander, and in parallel my reserve time, I joined Constellation Energy in 2005. Had 18 years with Constellation, great company, great people, and then 2 years ago in 2023, came over as CEO of SunRaycer Renewables.
Well, thank you for your service, first of all. Definitely an impressive bio, and kind of now diving into the energy sector and your position there. Give us some of the early successes. Obviously, growing from 3 to 25. I know you've got big growth ahead. Tell us a little bit about the people and your partners and your clients or your end users. Give us some of those early successes that you've experienced.
You bet. So obviously, we talked about the people, growing that team. Everyone that has experience as an owner and operator of renewables is on our team, and we're continuing to grow that and finding those people. But I think the partnership, how we look at our accelerant program, which we call it, is our partnerships with Samsung CT, for example. It's a developer that's working with us in Texas, ERCOT. We have 15 projects, 3 gigawatts of generation with them. We have Mastech IEA, who's our partner in building those first 2 projects that are coming online into this year. And at the same time, we procured equipment, long lead equipment with transformers, HV breakers through our partnerships with IEA, Mastech, and Constellation as well. So those partnerships, alliance partners, have been very important for us over the last 2 years to get us to this point where we are with our pipeline.
And how about the end users? And I'll preface that question with, the average person, thinks of solar as a rooftop solar that they can, put on their house and reduce their energy bill, or even for our clients, a industrial developer or a grocery center developer that wants to put, rooftop solar on to service their buildings. What's the scale of your projects? And then, who are you selling that energy to?
Great question. So we provide renewable solutions to large-scale commercial industrial users. I'll give you an example of 1 megawatt takes up about 5 acres of land. And so if you think our projects are minimum 100 megawatts of PV solar. You think of standalone battery, you think of a 200 megawatt 400 megawatt hour facility. Takes about a 5-acre footprint. And so we're selling, and obviously we announced this not too long ago that our first 2 projects that are going to come online at the end of this year, just south of Dallas Fort Worth, we're providing a PV purchase power agreement with Meta. So that's great news for SunRaycer.
Yeah, that's huge. That's obviously announcing that kind of client goes a long way. As the world kind of looks to alternative and renewable energies to kind of literally power our future, talk a little bit about that on the macro level. You've got artificial intelligence driving data centers and electric vehicles driving electric generation and a whole host of other things. And you've said it to me that a big reshoring of industry back to the United States is also requiring additional energy needs. Tell us a little bit about the macro world and where all of those things stand currently, and how SunRaycer and solar is a part of that.
Right. Our initial portfolio is concentrated in Texas ERCOT market at this time. But with the growth of AI, EVs, manufacturing, just population moving to that state, the demand has been growing. There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of projects. And of our 15 projects, they all will be online between now and end of 2028 to meet that demand that's growing there. Our partners, I'll give you an example in the manufacturing. We announced this Canadian Solar is our panel provider. They just built a 5 gigawatt plant in Mesquite, Texas for manufacturing. So that's just an example of not only manufacturing coming into Texas, but those panels and the Canadian Solar's providing panels for us. And that's just one example of in Texas what's happening with the growth. And then AI obviously is its own boom, but it's also a necessity. And so obviously we're here to support that, and we are doing that in Texas.
Our kind of relationship goes back many years, but our discussions on some renewable projects goes back probably 10 or 15 years on a personal family project of mine, where my dad, who was a CPA, was convinced to get into a residential home development in Western Maryland in 2005. And some of you may remember the Great Recession, and second homes in Western Maryland didn't sell real fast. And so they looked at taking 100 acres or so, maybe 200 acres, I don't recall, on the top of this mountain and turning it into a wind farm. And now 15, 17 years later, that still hasn't been accomplished, 20 years later, actually. And so I'm kind of bringing this home to some of our listeners who are, mid-Atlantic focused. What are the challenges in Maryland or in different markets? Obviously, you're in Texas, which I think is a big part of it is demand, but what are some of the challenges that individual jurisdictions have to, for your growth?
Right. And if anything, you got your local regulations, you got your siting. So permitting and regulations obviously is a challenge wherever you go, and it's state by state, and it's county by county. So obviously, everyone, if developing, it's a challenge for all developers and that are trying to build anything. Manufacturing, it could be renewables. It's a challenge. And also in the energy sector, obviously another challenge is you can build all these facilities, but transmission, right? You need to be able to move that electron. And so the big thing is actually having customers in demand, and then obviously having, it's a holistic, working with the state, working with the federal, state, and local and private. What's the demand? How are we going to approach this? And what are the needs? I guess, and in Maryland, they're starting those conversations, wanting more manufacturing, wanting more data centers in the state of Maryland. So that's great. Now you got to match up with how you're going to meet that demand through transmission, through generation, as you approach that. So it's got to be collective looking at that, because you just can't. Things have to change to make that happen.
And you're headquartered here in Maryland and Annapolis, yes, in particular, and so I'm sure you have to be a little delicate on what you say. But I'm a developer, and we live and work and and conduct business here every day. And there's a component of the not in my backyard community that I'm sure is a major hindrance to the growth of your industry. Where of course they say they want more industry, manufacturing or whatnot, but not in my community or not in my county. And we need more energy to supply those, but not in my backyard. And so
that happens everywhere. And I was making an example. You could be urban, rural. You're going to have this. You could be 1,000 acres, and your one neighbor goes, "I really don't want that," and it might not happen. So it's, that's a challenge to anything we do in development, and not just in our industry, but every industry. But that's, that's the teams, the outreach, and you're trying to explain what's the good here, what's the benefit, and obviously bringing energy and reliable, sustainable energy at the same time. We're going to be using more. So, I think people would agree that in this country that the energy infrastructure and more generation is obviously needed.
Right. And so the demand is there, which is great, for your industry, and we're going to have to supply it. With that said, if there was one thing you could wave your wand and kind of say, I'm going to solve this problem that holds back our growth or the growth of the industry as a whole, what would it be? Is it jurisdictional issues? Is it supply, material issues? Sounds like it's not demand, and it's not, and for every, as another mentor of mine used to say to me, Justin, if you have a good project, there's money for it. And,
right.
And so I assume that there's plenty of financing. So what would it be if you could, wave the flat, the wand and make something disappear that made it easier for you?
Great observation. I mean, the capital's there. There's plenty of capital, but capital's looking for great projects, and great projects come with great teams. And so you obviously got to have a team that knows what they're doing from the siting through their partners. And the biggest thing I would say, the wand, you could have all the capital, you can have the site control, you can have all the buy-in and regulatory. If you don't have the equipment to build it, it will not happen. So supply chain is very critical. And so you want projects that might take, for transformers, 30 months or longer to get that equipment. That takes a lot of planning and logistics to make sure that happens. And you got to make sure everything hits on time. And that's just not just for a transformer, but HV breakers and panels and batteries, lining that all up logistically. The supply chain is something that obviously we all know because the demand is there. So is the manufacturing. I know plants are expanding to meet the demand. I know manufacturing is coming to the U.S., but it's going to take time. Therefore, we need patience. And obviously, with those, if I could wave my wand, we'd make sure the supply chain be more robust.
Well, in one sense, that's obviously frustrating that you've got to wait on supply, materials and whatnot. But in another sense, hopefully that's a good sign that, that our country will, again, start to, onshore or reshore those, manufacturing facilities. And hopefully that's good.
Well, that was kickstarted with the IRA for us, for the renewable sector. There have been companies coming offshore in the United States. Like I said, Canadian Solar has built a 5 gigawatt facility in Mesquite, Texas, where we are, they're one of our partners when we're buying our solar panels from. We have our first couple of e-storage, our battery solution. Now they're bringing manufacturing to the U.S. in 3 facilities. So that's just an example of what's been happening over time to meet that demand of the renewables. Transformers being built in Brazil and Argentina. They're expanding. Obviously, we'd love to have transformer facilities in the U.S. Because I think the transformers, I'll bring it up again, are very critical to not only to developers and IPPs like SunRaycer, but also to the utilities, because you need the substations as well to be built for the utilities.
And one of the things that, again, thinking about our listeners here, we've got a lot of clients in the real estate, obviously industry and developers. And, one of the things that I find interesting is, your role is operator, developer, problem solver in the energy sector. And so, kind of traditional land developers or hyper focused, I'm sure, energy developers come to you and say, we're going to tie up these 5,000 acres of land or 500 acres of land, whatever size it may be. And we'll get it through the entitlement and the political side of it. And then they bring you on for kind of the horizontal and infrastructure and the, explain, who your client is in that sense.
What we do is we want to partner with developers that need pre-notice to proceed capital for their deposits, to interconnect deposits, for example. We want to be able to support that. But at the same time, we want to partner. We're a menu. We can come to us and say, we'll buy the projects from you. You develop them to NTP. We'll be the owner and operator of those assets. If they just want capital, we can provide that as well, and maybe expertise from our team and through our partners. So we're a one-stop shop for any developer that wants to come to us and go, what do you need? We can take it all the way through with our partners, and we will obviously buy these facilities from you. And we want you then to go off and grow more and do more projects that we want to do. So we want to, the partnership aspect of what SunRaycer does is we want to grow with you. It's not just a one transaction. We want to grow with you as we all grow.
And these developers, they're traditionally going out and sourcing the land. That's kind of the value they're bringing you as well, right? They go and, either they've got an end user or a jurisdiction that wants to do this, and they've got the expertise to take it through, the soft cost entitlement side.
All local, right? Yeah. So obviously with developers, we know, and as you well know in your industry here, it's all about being local, and we want the developers that are out there knowing the area, knowing the land, acquiring the land, getting the site control. That's what we want to talk to, and that's who we partner with. We did that with Samsung, had their 15 projects in ERCOT. We're working with other developers around the U.S. that have development that do not want to own and operate, and they're good teams. They have good projects. Like I said earlier, good projects bring capital, and we have the partnerships that actually can execute on these projects.
All right, let's pivot a little bit, because I think that's some really good insight on the industry as a whole. And the other thing that we really like to focus on in these podcasts is really kind of your entrepreneurial leadership perspective, and what it is that kind of drives you and the culture that you try and create with your team, et cetera. And so one of the questions I would ask, and we were talking about A players and having the right people in the right seats, explain kind of your leadership style, and do you implement any kind of specific operating systems like an EOS or a Gazelle or a lean management? And those are kind of some just well-known names, and I'm sure there's a Dave Lillefloren process, but is there anything in particular that you can give us some insight on how you lead really functionally?
You brought me back a little bit. I haven't brought this up, but I did 5 years with GE, and I was a master black belt, Six Sigma. I'm like,
there you go.
Brought back a long time ago there. And obviously the Navy.
Do you put it in your signature line on your?
No, I avoid that one. No, it's exactly. What ends up, the system that we brought is obviously we're new, 2 years old. We had 3 employees, and what we've been doing is industry leaders in their field, from commercial, finance, to legal, obviously to project execution, project management, engineering. We have a lot of experience, so we bring those experienced people to the SunRaycer. We're creating our own culture with our own experiences and making it SunRaycer. So what does that mean? We have when you're a small team, you come in here and you go, well, we got all hands on deck. Then you'd say, well, let's create processes. We've done that from all of our experiences, from all of our companies we've been associated with. So we're taking the best of our team and creating that. And at the same time, for our culture, I'm a big proponent of, with our teams, having all hands meetings, meet monthly to make sure they understand the business plan, where we sit with the business plan, how we're measured to that. I meet with my leadership team once a week on Tuesdays to make sure that there's alignment. Every 2 weeks at those meetings, we have 4 blockers so the teams can get aligned on what do they have accomplished, what do they want to accomplish, what are the risks, and what accomplishments they have seen. And so all the teams can see what everybody's working on. Should they be part of that? Should they be collaborating on that? So very inclusive that way with the leadership team, so they know what's going on.
And you call that a 4 blocker? Is that the term you use?
A 4 blocker.
And again, that's a specific type of kind of tracking, and and everybody has their own little version of that, and the size of your company really dictates that in a lot of ways. But one of the things that I've seen is kind of goes across all leadership platforms is a need for accountability, and that's not just a direct report to the person they're reporting to, but also between peers, and also going the other direction. It's funny, I make this joke with a lot of my friends that own businesses. It's like you see them at the end of a tough week, and I look at them and I say, be a business owner, they said, be an entrepreneur, make your own hours, and at the end of the day, as the owner and the CEO, you're accountable to everybody. They're there to implement, a lot of your strategy and help create. But at the end of the day, they hold you accountable as well. And so
if I could create hours, I would during the day, but obviously that's not going to happen.
Right. And so the accountability, which it sounds like meeting regularly, having a regular cadence is critical to you. And then the other thing, the fourth block that you kind of said there, which I think is also critically important, is, acknowledging accomplishments, and that's something that I think great leaders acknowledge accomplishments and certainly give, typically the credit to those below them that have helped to create something. But
your team, you're only as good as your people, and your team is doing all the work. And especially when you're a small, nimble team like we are, SunRaycer, we have great partners. But again, we have expertise, but everyone's working really hard for one mission that we're trying to create is that bringing renewables solutions to our customers.
And as your your leadership group, and that's, obviously you've got your kind of your team that's implementing the strategy, and then you've got partners, that may not be involved on a day-to-day basis with you, but are, kind of create the vision with you. How do you go about that creation? And this is a twofold, question back to, you've got to create kind of a 10-year vision and then be nimble inside of that. So who helps to create that vision? Is it everybody, in the company? Is it, is there a formal structure for that? Do you have a credit to those below defined plan in 10 years? This is who we're going to be.
Right. You said that vision, right? So obviously what we want to do at SunRaycer, we're growing like a gigawatt of pipeline per year. And that's something we want to do over the next, 5 to 7 years as we grow the company. So we came out the gate with that vision and had 4 gigawatts. So that was great. So that kickstarted us. So now we're obviously looking for that gigawatt of growth as we move forward, and we're doing that. And you set that vision of what we want to do, and then the team rallies around that. What do we need to get that accomplished? And so from the team, from the bottoms up and the top down, what do you need? What processes and tools do you need for us to accomplish that? And we bubble that up, and then I bring all of that to our investors and say, this is the business plan, how we're going to execute on that vision of a gigawatt of growth, bringing the current pipeline to operations, and this is what it takes to get that done. And we set that vision and growth with our investors.
And by doing it that way, do you feel like everybody has kind of ownership of their part of that plan? I mean, that's been one thing that I've really tried to implement with our team, is that, like, everybody's part of the process of creating what the vision should be, and then take ownership and accountability of their portion of it.
I think people need that and want that. I know in being teams, they really want that direction because they understand it. If they understand it, then the work product is even better because they know where we're going. I had an all hands meeting with my team 2 weeks ago here in Annapolis. They're all scattered all over the United States, and we had everyone here. And it was the state of the business. It was where are we going, reviewed the accomplishments, and I also said, what is it going to take as we move forward? And everyone walked away from there knowing what was the mission, what do I have to do to meet that mission, and we talked it out. And so I want everyone to be able to answer that question: what are we doing at SunRaycer, and how are we getting there? And I think we accomplished that by doing that.
I'd love to see your agenda for that all hands on deck, because we do that once a year as a sales. We call it our sales retreat, mm-hmm. And every year I try and kind of adapt it and be creative, and I love seeing what other people do. So we don't have to get into the details of that today, but with, again, you've got a team of 25 now, and you can't know every detail of every component of your business now. But generally, as a CEO and the leader of the company, you've got to have, broad knowledge of a lot of things. You've got to implement your leadership style across all those people. And so, again, one of the kind of questions that I love to ask people is, as a leader and knowing that you've got to be a lot of things to a lot of different people, if you had to describe the core of your role in one word, what word would you use? And I'll make it a little bit easier for you and give you a minute to think about it. And I'll tell you what mine is. Mine is I'm a connector. And I try and think that way every day with my team and with the people that are inside the company. And I also think that way with our third party clients and our partners. My goal is to, connect our brokers, with the right resources and services and support and opportunities to go, create their own businesses. And, with our mission statement is actually, connecting people, businesses, and real estate. And that, again, that goes to our clients as well. Client needs somewhere to operate their business. We connect them with the appropriate location. An investor wants to, put their money to work. We connect them with the right opportunity. So, with that being said, is there a word that you would use to kind of define your leadership style or your primary role as a leader?
Well, I'm influenced by this, obviously my time in the Navy, but I would say navigator. Navigators, they navigate through calm seas and heavy seas, and they make sure they get the team, in my case, maybe the ship and the company in the right direction, making sure everyone's going in the right direction, everyone's doing it safely and understand the mission. So I think navigator, that's what I'm doing.
I should have seen that one coming. That's obviously a great answer given your background. And it's, what a great role to put yourself in. Again, you've got to be able to see what's coming ahead. You've got to be able to know the appropriate time to pivot and turn and, or add more power or reduce the power or expand, the coverage. And so that's a great one.
I tell you, it helps out when you're building projects and you got due dates and you got to make sure you hit them. So you definitely got to, speed up and slow down to make sure you hit it at the right time.
All right, as we're kind of coming to the end here, I'll hit you with a couple of quick questions. And again, really the goal here is just to get a little insight on what leadership and day-to-day role looks like. So, having been in the Navy and having a very strict schedule, I'm sure as a midshipman, and then, being at a company like Exelon, and having a mission that you're, implementing on behalf of somebody else, I'm sure you had, more flexibility there. But now, again, back to my comment, you make your own hours. What does your day-to-day look like? What is what do you do? What is your day-to-day schedule now?
Obviously, you're always, at night before you go to bed, you're looking ahead what the day brings. But in the dynamic, as the energy sector is, you could wake up and you have 10 things you want to do, and you do 3 of them because other priorities come in. So I try to prioritize every night. What's the next day going to look at? But obviously, I tell people all the time, you're going to take care of your company. You're going to take care of people. You got to take care of yourself. So I try to get up early in the morning and go for about a 5-mile walk 2-3 days a week. And if it's weather like today that we're getting, you go inside the gym and try to get that in. But you got to take some time to reflect because obviously you're going to be go all the time. You got to carve out a little time for yourself, and then obviously that's what I do in the mornings. And then it's hit the ground running. It never stops. It's constant what we do 7 days a week.
And is it meetings all day long? Is there anything that you get to look at your schedule and go, this is fantastic. I have 3 hours. I can sit down and just do this. Because meetings, are critical. We've got to do them. And that's where, you hope a lot of gets accomplished, but it can be, overwhelming to go back to back to back.
It's meetings is one thing, but obviously, you definitely want to carve out good time, do a podcast with one of your old friends. So I carve that time out for sure.
Thank you.
But at the same time, it's you travel. You got you got to be at your sites. We're building something, so it's tangible. So you want to be at the sites. You have partners that you want to make sure that you're working together, if celebrating and working out any problems you might be having at the time. So you can call it meetings, but it's actually all part of the bigger picture of. I like that. I like working with teams. So I'm working my own team. I'm working with my partners, their teams. And so I don't.
You're a people person for sure, and so that makes a ton of sense to me. And all right, let me just keep going through a couple of these questions. So, at this point in your career, kind of third career, truly in a senior youleadership role, how would you define success going forward? Obviously for SunRaycer, but also for life right now. You've got adult kids.
Deep question. Yeah, I got the kids are all grown up. I always say that. I don't need any titles. I think the last title, and not too much pressure on my 3 girls, is to be a grandfather someday.
There you go.
That would be the last title, only title I think I need if I can get, God willing. But I think where I am right now, I'm blessed to be able to take my entire experience, and I've said this before, from the Navy, from Constellation, and now, and I've been in the energy sector a long time. A lot of relationships, 30-year relationships with people, and working with partners. Be able to do that in something you love to do. I mean, I love what I'm doing. That's why I'm in this spot. And I don't think it's a third career. I think it's just been to continue. It's a it's a third chapter of my continuation, I think.
I appreciate you putting it that way, because that's really how I like to think of things too. Like I truly try not to separate, and some people think I'm crazy with this, but I try not to separate work from home, from play, from, my philosophy on life. Like, to me, it's got to be all one and the same. Otherwise, you're wasting time somewhere. If you're spending too much here, you're not doing enough there. But if you kind of mix and mingle it all together, which at the end of the day is really relationship driven.
It's all relationship management. I tell you one thing about where you are, and I remember having my young 3 daughters, and and it's still in their adults. You're only as happy as your saddest kid, and so that is the
wow.
And so so that's life. So what's priority is that's your happiness as a parent. So I always when my kids are happy, I'm happy. I think Ross Perot was asked, what's successful like. When he was asked, he goes, "I'll let you know when my kids how my kids do."
Yeah,
I think it's all about at the end of the day, it's all about our family. At least for my case, it's my family. When you ask about life and career, I love what I'm doing, and I have the support from my wife Patty, and I'm very happy where SunRaycer is today.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's probably a good spot to end it today. You've just want to say thank you for doing this, and super impressive what you've built the last few years. And I would agree with you that that's not 2-3 years of work. That's a lifetime of work and relationships that you've now maximized and capitalized on. And that's why I look at you as a mentor, because I try and, careers like that is what I'm trying to build long term, is that, you don't, transition from one to the next. It all flows together and you just keep building upon it. So
thank you for having me, my friend. And anytime, I'd love to come back.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Coffee Talk with Justin Mullen. Topics on leadership, culture, CRE, brought to you by Hyatt Commercial. Until next time.